Hello, my name is Karole Armitage. I'm the choreographer of this Agon project. Agon is something I danced as when I was a ballet dancer, and I was working with Balanchine in the Geneva Ballet Company. So as a 17-year-old, I performed it and loved it. It's in my mind, I think, in every single thing I have ever done for 35 years of choreography. It's Einstein's relativity. It is the Demoiselles d'Avignon of Picasso. I mean, it's the single most important generative piece of dance done in the 20th century that has kind of launched everything choreographers think about ever since. So I knew it was a complete folly to do it. But because the orchestra is on the stage and we are raised up on these platforms surrounding it, it's such a very different kind of piece than a normal stage work that I thought it was something that I could be foolish enough to do. And I'm really glad I did, because it's been such an encounter with the mind of Balanchine and the mind of Stravinsky in such an incredibly intimate way. It was supposed to be the third Greek-inspired piece in the Balanchine-Stravinsky trilogy. It came much later than the earlier pieces, which were, Orpheus and Apollo. So these are kind of like well-known stories. All of a sudden, this was one they could invent themselves. And Balanchine wanted to make a ballet to end all ballets, a huge kind of fireworks piece that was based on all of the muses, and it was like bring to life all of the arts. And Stravinsky was like, wanted to do something based on the Odyssey and something very, very restrained and with a kind of minimalist palette. So they had these very opposing ideas. This was a crisis time in Stravinsky's life. He had come to a point where he was in his 70s. He was no longer getting commissions as a composer. He was feeling like the world had passed him by. He was like the old story. He heard Schoenberg's 12-tone music, the dodecaphonic. He felt like he was very depressed. He had to earn a living. He was working as a conductor. And so that was his mindset. Balanchine, I think, was really at the peak of his career, quite the opposite. It was kind of the height of his powers and recognized for this. Then Lincoln Kirstein, who was, kind of the business brains and behind the creation of New York City Ballet and bringing Balanchine to America, who loved Greek and classical work, gave Stravinsky one of these manuals of the kind of late Renaissance, early Baroque dance. And in this, he found these sounds of mandolins and flutes and the gaillard and the branly, all of these traditional dance rhythms, which really are pulse-driven motor that that the human body can really feel, and in tempos that work for movement. And from there, they launched this idea of making a piece that was about agon, conflict, contest, competition, battle of wills. But as much as anything is really an agon for Balanchine and Stravinsky with the world, bringing to the world their point of view that the only thing that is stable in a mutable world is the solidity of classicism, the continuity and elegance and beauty of classicism. So this is kind of their manifesto to the world, actually. This is what Agon is. I felt like I was starting over, as if I had never listened to a piece of music or choreographed a dance step, because it is so particular. All the silent downbeats mean you don't have the kind of physical impulse that one is used to that just tells you where the music is. And it's kind of like the floor, it's what we walk on, or it gives us the buoyancy, is the music. So just learning to understand this music has been really hard, and then to actually be liberated enough to make steps to it so it's not just a purely technical exercise is quite challenging. Dance, sort of since 1957, when it premiered, dance has taken veered off. We have left behind the idea of literally following music and instead dance much more through the motor rhythm of the body. And music is often really a soundscape rather than the driving pulse. So to go back to this incredible basic, kind of the hallmark of classicism, is a fabulous exercise. And but it was very humbling. So it's everything I've tried not to do my entire life, I had to start doing again. Well, I was raised in classical ballet, and I've always felt my role was, like Balanchine or Cunningham, who I danced with, was to bring the cultural influences of today into the dialogue with the past. I mean, that's very much my interest. And now the most popular thing in the world is, thinking about gender and what it means. And of course, he was already reversing gender roles in Agon in a very, very interesting way, in a very subtle way. But the women at times they're coming across as extremely refined and feminine, and other times they are just charging Amazons, who are as powerful, if not more powerful than the men. It's interesting because I see that the Balanchine way of making the steps is he even said this, I'm like a carpenter. I build and I nail the things in. And this is one of the things that's been very hard for me, because something about my sensibility, and I think it is a feminine sensibility, is much more curving and feeling, and I could bring in some of that curvature and sinuousness and maybe a little bit more of the almost mysterious factors rather than just the building blocks. Now, the building blocks have to be there also, but of course he laid down the groundwork so I could riff on that, because if that hadn't been there, I wouldn't know how. Great dance is architecture in time. If you're just out there emoting, it is boring and it is too personal. You need this rigorous discipline that is from the tradition of architecture and understanding of time. But through that discipline, one allows personality and sensibility and subject matter to, like a perfume, waft out of that structure and speak to each other as intimate beings. I mean, that is the whole point of dance, is this intimate way of having a dialogue with our internal life.